Hello, everyone. It's Jennifer Darling here with Positively Successful Sales and Darling Coaching, and I'm so excited to be here today. I'm interviewing another Jennifer, and she's my good friend who is an attorney, a business attorney, and she's here tonight, and she's going to give us some really great tips, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that in just a second, but I want to welcome everybody to the Positively Successful Women in Business show, Facebook Live show, and I want to let you know that if you're joining us, please, there's a comment button, and I would love to see some comments from anybody who's coming into the show. So please make sure you write some comments so that we know you're here. So welcome. Let me tell you a little bit about our guest tonight. Our guest, who's with me here? Sometimes my dogs are in the room with me, Jennifer, but today it's just me. So I don't know, me and my cold, I suppose. So Jennifer Goldsmith is a graduate of Santa Clara University School of Law, and she opened her own practice 5 years ago to serve small business owners and entrepreneurs like all of us with both their personal and their professional estate plans. Now, Ms. Goldsmith works with her clients to make a comprehensive plan for their lives in case of emergencies or other life events that happen, all the time. Her goal is to ensure that the lives of her clients are built, that she helps build and protect them and their wishes they are fulfilled in accordance with their core values in time of times of uncertainty, that's right. Okay. She accomplishes this through strategic business planning, personal estate planning, and philanthropic. So we're going to go over a few different things tonight. I'm going to tell you we're going to go over business planning, and we're going to hope to get to employee versus independent contractor agreements, and then we might talk a little bit more. And I already see that Judy Wright is here, and she says, good topic. I'm so glad you jumped on, Judy, because I've got a cold, and I could use a little bit of your good energy to help give Jennifer the best presentation that she has on Facebook Live. So Jennifer, welcome so much to the show. So tell us a little bit about your business and what you do and how it's different than, there's all kinds of attorneys. So what do you do?
There are always all kinds of attorneys. And actually, one of the first questions I usually get is, well, do you do criminal law? And do you do family law? And do you do this other type of law? And I'm like, no, I do what I do. And let me explain a little bit about that. So what I do is I do personal estate plans for people, which is all of your personal finances. But I love working with entrepreneurs and small business owners because our businesses are so tied up in our personal lives and vice versa. And so I love to give people this comprehensive plan that takes care of everything so that when they go home at the end of the day, they know that no matter what happens, it's all taken care of. They don't have to worry about it. It's one of those other things that you can sort of take off your plate and not have to think about. So that's what I do, is sort of just help them through the whole process.
And one of the things I love about you, and we interviewed your sister Heather last week, whose sister Heather is with us right now. Hi, Heather. Is that you both have, Heather's in finance and you're in legal, and neither of you are stuffy people. You are both so wonderful and warm and welcoming. So you don't normally, think of an attorney that way. You don't normally think of a CFO or an accountant that way, although, there are certainly, my accountant is not a stuffy guy. He's super cool. But you and Heather are both so much fun that I think it's, one of the really good benefits of working with you, besides your totally brilliant brains, is that you're a really good, that you both have really good personalities. I like that about you. So tell us a little bit, you're welcome. So tell us a little bit about business planning, because that's one of the things we talked about that you'd think that would be really great value for all the people watching this Facebook Live video is people get really confused about, well, how should I have my business? Should it be a sole proprietorship? Should it be an LLC? Is an S Corp, C Corp? There's so many different ideas. Can you tell people a little bit about what are some of the factors they might think about in determining how that should work?
Absolutely. And I will tell you that there are too many different types of organizations for me to go over all of them in the next 20 to 30 minutes, but I will hit some of the big ones.
Okay.
So basically it all comes down to liability and to risk. So if you are a sole proprietorship, that means that everything that you own and everything that you do is all sort of intermingled and everything's on the line every day that you're out there and you're taking care of business. So a sole proprietorship, we generally do not recommend. If you can get out of it, get out of it. The only thing is that sometimes there is a tax advantage, and I am not a tax attorney and I am not a CPA, so I just want to put that out there. But there sometimes is a tax advantage for people in being a sole proprietor just because of the way that the income flows through. But it does have the most risk. You are personally liable for anything you do in your business, anything that might happen to anybody, whether that's an employee, if that's a customer, etc. All of you and your own assets are on the line for that. So your house, your bank accounts, etc. The next step up is an LLC or an LLP. Those are limited liability companies and limited liability partnerships. Actually, I take that back. There is one step below, which is just a partnership. But basically, same as a sole proprietorship, except that there's two of you, and so you are each on the line for each other as well as yourself. So actually,
both houses are in risk.
Both of your houses and both of your bank accounts, yeah. So a limited liability company is for anybody who doesn't have specific professional licenses. A limited liability partnership is for certain people. Like, I can only be in an LLP. I cannot be in an LLC just because of my licensing. So if you need an LLP, you probably know you need an LLP. So I'm not going to go into that too terribly much. An LLC is sort of your mid-range for risk management. It does limit your liability. That's why it's called a limited liability company. But
they were smart when they named that one.
I know. So it does limit your liability a bit, but it's still not as good as a corporation. And that's because as a limited liability company, you still have some skin in the game. Whereas with a corporation, whether that's an S Corp, a C Corp, there are also, other letters, corporations, you can have a foreign corporation, all sorts of stuff that's way too complicated. But when you enter into a corporation, you actually form a new entity. And that corporation is the equivalent of its own person. And since it's the equivalent of its own person, it has all of its own liability that is completely separated from you. The difference between, so the two corporations that we see most often that people get into are either a C Corp or an S Corp. They are very similar, but an S Corp is what's considered a close corporation, or some people refer to it as a family corporation or a private corporation. So when you talk about an S Corp, what's going on there is it has less than 100 shareholders. It's generally very closely held, and there are fewer requirements of that. So things like you may not be required to have a board meeting and keep minutes. And it makes it a little bit more difficult to pierce the corporate veil because there's not as many requirements for it. A C corporation, you have to follow all the bells and whistles, all of the rules, make sure that your I's are dotted, your T's are crossed. But it is absolutely the most difficult. If you set everything up properly, it is the most difficult for people to get through that corporation and to you for your personal liability issues. So it just sort of depends on where you're at, risk versus reward and all the rest of it.
So it sounds like, it's really kind of like, I see it almost like a scale here, which is high risk with the sole proprietorship for you personally and lower risk for the C Corp personally, but, lots of rules and regulations for the C Corp, and then some very different types of tax advantages and disadvantages that you might have depending on where you're at. Now, is that something, does Heather do tax for, is she an expert on that?
So Heather doesn't do taxes necessarily, but she probably could answer some of the questions. Generally, what happens with a corporation, or even when you do an LLC, is that you start to run everything through the business instead of through your personal. Now, she and I have worked on workshops together. The first thing that you do if you're going to go into business for yourself is separate your finances. Take your personal finances and your professional finances and put them in completely separate accounts.
Okay, so this is a really, really super duper bonus tip right here, right? Because I have to tell you, that when I started my business 2 years ago, that I had, 3 credit cards, personal, and different business things are going on 3 credit cards. And for one, it's a nightmare. It's not a nightmare, but it takes a lot more time to sort everything out because I have to, my personal taxes and my business taxes are separate, that I turn in. So just for like bookkeeping purposes, it's a really great thing to do, but also for risk, it's a really good thing to do.
Right. So we were talking about like piercing that corporate veil. If you've got personal money in the business account and business money in the personal account, that is a way that they can pierce that corporate veil for any of the entities that you may have formed. So all of a sudden, you may be personally liable for everything that you were trying to protect by having a corporation. So absolutely, positively, before you do anything else, like we're talking super tips. This is the biggest tip that I could give you, Heather could give you, anybody could give you is if you
and it's super simple, right?
It's super simple. You can have a separate personal account. You don't have to have a business account. You don't have to have a trust account. You don't have to do any of these things. Just set up a separate bank account and all of the business money goes in the business account or the separate personal checking account. And all of your personal money goes in your personal account. But awesome. Separating your money is by far the first thing. As soon as, Katerina. So as soon as Katerina says that you've got that brilliant idea syndrome, when that brilliant idea comes to you and you've decided you're going to turn it into a business, take aside some money, put it into a separate account,
and go to the bank.
Working out of that account before anything else.
Right. Okay. Well, that's really great because, a lot of people are new entrepreneurs and they don't know that. So that's a really, really good tip. So another thing that you and I were going to talk about, which is really happens a little bit more for entrepreneurs or our small business owners when they start to need more people, when it goes beyond themselves. And now, there's too much of the business. It's successful. There's too much for them to manage on their own. And a lot of us are talking about hiring virtual assistants. People are talking about, should I hire a VA or should I get a social media person or should I get this person or that person, or should I, I need somebody 40 hours a week. Should I just hire somebody? So I know a lot of people are really interested in one of the topics we put out there, which is what's the difference between hiring an employee and hiring an independent contractor?
Mm-hmm. So this is going to be my sort of super tip on this piece for you guys to think about, is that a lot of people think that the most important word in independent contractor is contractor, but it's not. It's independent. So if you always keep that in mind, that the biggest sort of pitfall people fall into is this idea that an independent contractor is not independent, that because they work for you, they do things for you, that you get to dictate. That's not the way that it is. It's an independent contractor, and that's why independent comes first. So that's sort of, if you can keep that in mind, it'll make it a lot easier to tell the difference between an independent contractor and an employee.
So what might that look like? I'm trying to think of, so when you say dictate to them, what ways might that come out?
Right. So if you make them come to a specific place to do work, that might make them an employee. If you dictate the hours during which they must complete the work, that might make them an employee. If you are too much of a micromanager, that might make them an employee. Realistically, the best thing to do with an independent contractor is to give them tasks to do, and you can certainly give them a deadline by which it needs to be done. But It's all about, they can get it done in the way that works for them and in the time frame that works for them. So if they want to be working at 2:00 in the morning, in their living room in their pajamas, hey, that's fine. But if you're requiring them to come to your place of business during your work hours and do things under certain time constraints, certain physical restraints, etc., that's where you're most likely to get into trouble. There's like a 21-point checklist, I think it is, of what makes an independent contractor versus an employee. And, you don't have to meet all of the requirements for an independent contractor because that's nearly impossible. But when you start meeting fewer and fewer of them, then you may become an employee. The other thing for people to consider is if you're looking for longevity in your independent contractors, is longevity can actually make them into an employee.
That's interesting.
Yeah, there was a court case back, and I believe it was against Apple, where they, and I hate to just throw out a big company name there, so if I'm wrong, don't quote me on that. It was down in Silicon Valley, though, where they had independent contractors, but they had them for years, like 3 years. And at some point, the court said, no, these are employees. You're using them as independent contractors to avoid paying all of the benefits that go along with being an employee. And you can't do that. You can't just use an independent contractor forever without them becoming an employee. The other thing that I oftentimes hear is, well, so-and-so does work for me, but they also work for a bunch of other people too. So that makes them an independent contractor. That's not the case. That's the same as if I worked for McDonald's and Target. I may have two jobs, but I'm still an employee of both of those
such
jobs.
Awesome points. Yeah.
So that doesn't necessarily make someone an independent contractor. Anytime that you are going to work with an independent contractor, you can get an independent contractor agreement. They have some online. I probably would still recommend that you get it reviewed by somebody, and having it reviewed by an attorney shouldn't cost you that much, $50 to $100, something in there, because you're really talking about them covering maybe 15 to 20 minutes worth of their time. If it's going to take them much longer than that, then you might want to talk to a different attorney. But they do have forms online. I would never use a form online and just use that without, at a bare minimum, read through it yourself. But, try and have
just to pick it up and have a PDF and say, hey, I'm sending this over. That's a no-no, because we don't even know if that form has been reviewed by an attorney or even an attorney in your state, because every state, the laws are different, right?
Exactly. And that was going to be my next point, is that California law is very different than anywhere else. And since we are on Facebook Live, which is international, we should probably mention the fact that I'm only licensed in the state of California. So I am not giving legal advice outside of the state of California. And
we're actually not giving it.
Yeah, I'm not giving legal advice at all. I'm just sort of, leading you through the process.
Yeah, to check out. Yeah. And, I will say that, so I was employed by a company in California, lots of companies in California, but one company in particular is we have annual for the rest of the country. And then we had only one for California. All other 49 states had an employee manual, and we had one for California, and it was 200 pages longer than the one for the rest of the country. So there are just a lot more, I think, things to protect employees, which is a good thing. But as an employer, you need to be very aware of these things. And definitely, if I learned one thing in my life, it's to hire an attorney for any kind of contracts that you are putting out there. I don't care what it is. Hire an attorney to review the contracts. Make sure you have the right kind of attorney to review the contract. But that is such a critical thing, because even if it costs $400, it's probably going to cost you a lot less than if something happens and then you have to pay legal fees to fight it, and even just the legal fees to fight it, and then you have to pay, if you have to pay money back for who knows what, all those benefits, then that's a lot more money than that original investment. It's kind of like insurance. So much better off having insurance for your car. You pay a little bit every month to avoid having to pay a huge thing if something happens. So I will say that, whether you're in California or anywhere, you really need to, for these things are very serious, to be contacting an attorney. But I bring this one up particular because I was at a mastermind group a couple of weeks ago, and in the room we had somebody who was considering whether I'm going to hire an independent contractor or an employee. And what's fascinating to me is they got opinions from everyone in the room, had opinions, and I remember saying, and hopefully the person, I told him, make sure you come see this call. I said, here's the deal. This is a legal matter. Don't get the opinions of all the 50 other people in the room, because none of them actually know. Actually talk to an attorney, because this one here, it sounds like there are some very specific requirements depending.
There are very specific requirements for whether you're an independent contractor versus an employee. You do have to worry about all of the benefits and the other things that you need to pay if they are an employee. And then, of course, you have to decide if they're going to be an employee. Are they an overtime exempt employee, or are they non-overtime exempt? And employers get themselves into trouble with that one all the time, too. They think, oh, well, this person's overtime exempt, so that just means that I can schedule them for 48 hours in a week. And that's not the way that it works either. Or they'll tell people that are overtime exempt, they'll say, oh, well, if you work less than a few hours in a day or what have you, that you need to put in PTO for the rest of the days. That's not how that works either. The whole point is that it's supposed to even out. Some days you'll work less, some days you'll work more, and so long as you get the work done, it's not supposed to matter how long it takes you.
So what's the difference between hiring an independent contractor and me hiring Heather to do bookkeeping, or me hiring you to be an attorney, or me hiring whomever I might get services from? What's the difference there then?
So we're our own companies, and we offer our services to you, and we are basically vendors. So since we're vendors for you, we would invoice you as a vendor, but you are not hiring me for your company. You would enter into your own contract with me as a vendor. So it would be the same as if you contacted a party planning company and they were providing chairs and balloons and tables and all of that, and you paid them an invoice for their services for that event that they put on for you. They're their own independent company. They report all of their stuff regarding their employees, their income, etc., to the government, and they are handled under their own separate identity and entity. So that's the difference there. When you're hiring an individual to work for your company and to do the project-based things that are specific to your company, it also has to do with services, right? So when you're hiring somebody to do what your company does, but to do it on behalf of your company, then that's an independent contractor. When you're hiring somebody to do something that their company does, and that's in their wheelhouse, then they're most likely a vendor.
So a business coach.
So a business coach, you're offering a different service than what I do, right? So if I were to hire you as my business coach, I'm not in the business of business. So you're in the business of business. You're giving me a different service than what I offer in my own and in my own entity. So Heather offers financial services. That's not something that my company or my brand offers to somebody. That's something that's an entirely different service. That's an entirely different.
Awesome. Okay, I get you. Just made that really clear for me. So thank you for doing that, because I didn't question that before. But then as you puzzle, I started thinking, oh, well, like, social media strategist, I do that. So if I hired somebody to do more of that for my clients, that would be either employee or independent contractor. But if I hired somebody to do, let's say, Instagram and actually do the work, and I don't even, but they're doing it for my company, not my clients.
Right. So if they were doing it for your clients, because it's a service that now you're packaging into your contract with your client and into your business. So say that you were to add on Instagram as part of a service that you offer, but you still want to sort of subcontract that out. You're contracting that out to an independent contractor because it's directly to your customers that's flowing through. Whereas business to business services are vendors, whereas business to customer services, that's where you're going to run into your independent contractor.
Okay, excellent. See, you make this sound so easy. That's why you get paid the big bucks. Okay, we have 5 minutes. First of all, I want to make sure to let everybody know, if you're watching and you have questions, please ask questions. Jennifer won't be giving that she can answer and point you in the right direction. More than happy to bring that up, and I'll pop it right up on the screen. And Heather's been here with us all along, and Judy Wright's here. So thank you, ladies, for joining us. We appreciate that. And then let's move on. I'm going to say we have 4 minutes, and I'll say, why don't you give maybe one little quick tip about business succession planning, because we have that on the agenda, but we're not going to be able to get into it real deep, but maybe a quick tip, and then how they could get some more information about it.
So there's two separate things that people sometimes don't think about. So business planning is when you sit down and you think about where your business is going and how you're going to get there. And that's certainly something that you want to do just on a regular basis and review and figure out if your milestones and things are being met. And there is something very specific called a business plan that is generally implemented just sort of for keeping yourself on track. But if you're looking for any sort of capital, like venture capital or anything, they will require a very specific business plan. And that's something where you want to talk to somebody who knows all about that. There's some very specific financial information and other information that needs to be in there. So that's a business plan, which is different than business succession planning. Business succession planning is planning for what happens at the end of the life of your business, whether that's because you want to sell it, you want to close it down, something happened and it just can't run anymore, any of those things. And the biggest key that I can give you with succession planning is that it's all about writing down all of the silly little things that you don't think are important. Who has copies of all of your keys? Where are all of your passwords? Where are the account numbers for the bank account? Where are the debit cards for the bank accounts? Who's a signatory on everything? It's literally sitting down and thinking about all of those minute details that you don't think about on a day-to-day basis. It's like a policies and procedures on steroids. It is just every little tiny detail that you would never think needs to be written down because, oh, I know all of that and what's the big deal? It needs to be written down somewhere. And then after you've got it all written down, then you need to start thinking about, okay, so if something were to happen to me, who's the next in line who could handle this, 30 pages of passwords and keys and policies and procedures and operating procedures that I've just written down? Is that one person? Is it two people? Do you have confidential information? Do you have HIPAA requirements? Do you have confidentiality issues like I do with clientele where, maybe I need a release from somebody in order to have someone else look at their information? So those are all of the types of things that you need to put together in a business succession plan.
Here, Judy's on. She says you must do the detail, a binder of responsibility. That sounds like a good tip to add on. Thanks, Judy. All right, Jennifer. Well, our time is up. It's been 30 minutes already. Can you believe it? I want to thank you so much for being my guest this evening. You're just full of knowledge and awesome information that's so valuable to people. So thank you for doing that. I'm also going to let everybody know that I'm going to put a link to Jennifer's information on the comments after we close the show tonight. Jennifer, do you have any parting words that you want to say to our audience on this Good Friday?
I just want to say thank you so much for having me. It was great. I've never been interviewed before, and it was super easy. So I appreciate that. And I had told you before that regarding the business succession planning, I do have a longer webinar. So if that's something that people are really interested in, I'll shoot you the link and they can go to it. It's obviously free. There's nothing, no cost to it. I just want to make sure
that would be a great thing for people to take advantage of. So shoot me the link and I'm for sure going to put it on the comment section. That's a really wonderful gift for you to offer. Thank you very much for that. Awesome. Okay, so we'll do that. Judy, you have an awesome holiday weekend too. And thank you to everybody for coming to our Positively Successful Women in Business series. On Monday, I'm working on a special surprise guest for you. So make sure that you check my Facebook page and like my Facebook page so that you can find out who's going to be our special guest on Monday. And we have more guests next week. So the whole month of April, we're celebrating positively successful women in business. And I can't wait to bring you more tips and valuable information to help your business grow. It's Jennifer Darling, your positively successful sales coach with Darling Coaching. Have an awesome weekend. Thank you, Jennifer. Bye, Heather. Bye, Judy.